I'm Coach Dave. Welcome back to Coach's Corner.
Come on.
All right, welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner. Coach Dave McDonough here today. Listen, I really appreciate everybody out there, but we need people to like and subscribe on the podcast. We got a great year coming up here, a lot of great guests lined up here, more content, and I am very thankful for where we are today. But another great guest today, I have Bryant Pappas out of Valid Boxing, Yonkers PD, fighter, all-around boxing manager, been in the game a long time, 23-1?
23-2-1.
23-2-1 as a professional. So we talk about people in boxing and everything else. Bryant is one of the good guys out there in boxing. And for the people who've been in the sport, you know what I mean by good guys. He's looking out for fighters. He's in the management end. He's connected in. But, I've had the opportunity to meet Bryant through Ryan O'Leary and Champs Boxing. And, the network in boxing is just outstanding. And welcome, Bryant. I appreciate you taking the time out. I know you're busy, had fights this past weekend, working and everything else, but thank you for taking the time out to be here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've crossed paths in gyms, but we really never had any in-depth conversations in the sport. And, I know where you are and what you do and what you're doing, but what was your start for boxing? Everybody, they see us now. They don't know where we started or why we started. What was it to you that brought you to the sport of boxing?
Well, I guess as a kid, growing up, I guess in the late 70s, early 80s, Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, all these guys were huge on TV. There was always an interest in it. It wasn't really until high school. I went to Fordham Prep. I was on the wrestling team, and the wrestling coach actually trained boxers at Gleason's gym. He said to me, listen, you got the height and the reach and the build for boxing. You should try it. He kind of planted the seed a little bit. Then I remember senior year of high school, before I was to leave for college, to Gettysburg College, I took a course at the Westchester Community College with Steve
Acunto.
Yeah, Steve Acunto. And it was great. So I learned a little bit there, the fundamentals. And then when I went to Gettysburg College, they did have the NCBA, the National Collegiate Boxing Association. So I boxed at Gettysburg College for about 4 years. And when I got out of there, I decided to continue. I really fell in love with the sport. Wrestling was over for me. And I really the sport was not easy for me. It was not something that I picked up. It took a lot of work. And I think because it was difficult, that's why I kept with it. And I just continued from there. And I went to Gleason's gym, and it turned out that Bruce Silverglade's son, Joshua Silverglade, had gone to Gettysburg as well. And I met him briefly at Gettysburg, and Bruce went to Gettysburg, and I started training at Gleason's gym, and I had Don Wallace as my trainer, and I had whole great trainers even before that. And I decided to stick with it and to keep going and see how far I could go with the sport.
Yeah, I mean, look, the intro for you is at a really big level, being in Gleason's, great trainers throughout the years there, a great foundation. Steve Acunto, for many people who don't know the gentleman, legend in boxing, a real, I remember him at Westchester, being part of that later on and talking to him, just one of the best fundamental guys in boxing out there for the love of the sport. So your base is really strong there. When did the competition end of it come to you? Because we all, you're working with fighters, it takes time for fighters to kind of get a groove, get a hold, and, to see if this sport is for them with a trainer. And especially, starting a little late, whereas now a lot of these amateurs are starting when they're 8, 9, 10 years old. The experience is a little bit more. But you're in the right places. You're around the right people. When did it say, okay, I want to try to compete? And how much were you training at that point?
So I was always training, even from high school, but as far as the boxing goes, so I did not compete I think it was my sophomore year of college where I competed. I think that was the first time I competed in the amateurs as a sophomore in school. I think we fought VMI. We'd fight like VMI, the Citadel, Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy, Lock Haven, all these other schools there. So I started competing my sophomore year, and I really enjoyed it. And look, I lost a lot of fights. I won a lot of not a lot of fights. I won some fights. I lost a lot of fights early on. And it was just a very difficult sport, a very unforgiving sport that the truth comes out in the ring. The truth, if you've been running, if you've been training, if you've been doing the little extras that you should do and need to do, it all does come out during competition time. And the experience and seasoning and being a veteran and knowing what to do and the quality of sparring, that comes out as well. But I did start competing. I probably was like 18 or 19 when I had my first amateur fight. And I just continued from that point on. Then when I graduated, I actually moved to Brooklyn for a bit, and I was training at Gleason's gym with Don Wallace, and then later on with Bob Jackson, and then later, much later, with Pascal Roust and Hector Roca. So I just kept active in the amateurs, and I really enjoyed it immensely. And you get out of it what you put into it. And like you said, I didn't start at 10 or 12 years old. I didn't have 50 fights as a junior. To walk in as an amateur, as a novice, with actually 50 fights, under my belt or whatever. So I enjoyed it. I kept with it. Then I got on the job as a police officer, and I kept with it a little bit there. And then I decided eventually I wanted to turn professional. And it was a lot between, those two things. A lot of decision-making went into that.
Yeah, I mean, but, your background, you mentioned some of the great coaches, Pascal Roust being a local guy, Hector Roca, legendary, Don Wallace, all the people out there at Gleason's gym. And, boxing in college now, which is becoming more prevalent today with boxing clubs being in college. I do a lot of work with the UConn boxing team with Mike Campiziano, who's the head coach there. So I think it's great that if, you have that opportunity to fight at the college level, as a club level, and to travel, and, all the military institutions do have boxing. So I like that aspect. Whether you're going to be a fighter or not, we know not everybody's going to be a fighter.
Right.
Not everybody is going to be, an amateur fighter or a professional fighter. They might just, the training, and like you said, boxing exposes you, whether you're a professional, an amateur, or just an individual training. When you walk into that ring, you've been there. Okay, you've been there a lot. Okay, as a professional and as an amateur, so your experience, you can't lie to yourself.
You can't. It comes out.
Yeah,
definitely does.
It's and to your team, but as a pro. When you decide to go pro, and look, you have a lot of fights as a pro and a lot of experience. What did you see the difference at that level when, you went from the amateur to the professional level?
Well, besides the matchmaking, which is a little different, I mean, the sport is definitely different from amateur to professional. So, in the amateur boxing, you kind of just sometimes just show up with a pass book. Sometimes they want pre-arranged bouts. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes guys, they used to fib about their pass books or get a new pass book. I don't know if that happens anymore. I'm not really plugged into the amateur scene anymore. But as far as a professional, the difference is that obviously one is money, but it's the amount of rounds and it's, the size of the gloves, the composition of the gloves, the no headgear, all the stuff on the surface, but also as a professional, there's a few different paths to take. Unfortunately, right now in the sport of boxing, there's almost like you want to be the home team guy or something, and you want an advantageous matchup, and they talk about A side and B side. I hate to use those terms, but there's in a lot of local shows and sometimes in the bigger shows, there's an A side and there's a B side, and the A side is usually guy. A I say stands for advantage. And B stands for be in better shape, and you'll beat the A guy.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
And it's just an advantage. This isn't the 1940s or 50s where a guy gets hit on the chin and he lays on the floor. There doesn't need to be that sort of thing anymore. There isn't that sort of thing anymore. It's just advantage. It's an advantage. So if you are a young professional and You can sell a lot of tickets because of your job or your family, or you're just one of those guys that's a well-known person, or very charismatic, or a huge social media following. You can go ahead and you can sell that and to a promoter and say, look, I can sell 100 tickets. I can sell 200 tickets. I can bring tables. I can do this. I need an advantageous matchup. And look, no one's going to match you up with a walking corpse, but you're going to probably be able to secure for yourself, especially when you're first starting out, a building up a matchup that would be more suited to see where you are, sort of a test. And if you're just a guy who wants to fight, especially in a bigger market like a New York, like a Nevada, Florida, Pennsylvania, you're a guy that just wants to fight. You just want to show up and fight. You're really not going to, if you can't bring anything else to the table, if you don't have a gold medal, if you don't have a huge social media and or ability to sell tickets, you're really not going to, or if you don't have sponsors, you're really not going to be able to bring that sort of influence to the promoter to say, hey, put me on your show. Because the promoters want to make money. They want someone who's going to bring people to their event. Now, whether or not the promoter has the ability to take in the money from the food and beverages and alcohol is a whole nother matter, but he wants people there. And if you could bring people there, you could kind of almost write your own contract. You could almost write your own deal. But if you can't, then sometimes you have these guys who just show up to get paid. They just show up to make money, and they'll take tough fights. And those guys, we used to call those guys opponents. Now they call them B-side. I don't like that term, because what's a quote-unquote B-side for someone else might totally destroy another guy. So it's really, it depends.
Yeah, and I mean, you're given an aspect of it, not only from the fighter aspect, but you dabble in the promotional, the management end, giving that insight. And we know, look, some of these fighters out there today, and the terminology is A or B or whatever the case you want to call it. I agree with you. I don't like the terminology either, because as trainers, we train fighters to win.
Yes.
We train fighters to win.
Absolutely.
Okay, no matter who we're fighting, right? So as a fighter, you train to win. You don't come in and say, well, I'm the B-side. I can hang back here.
Right.
You want to come in and knock the favorite off, right? Like,
100%.
Like we can talk about, at the aspect of football, favorites and underdogs, okay? We can use that terminology. Sure. I'm an underdog on Sunday. I want to knock the favorite off in his home stadium, right? But from the promotional aspect, we see today fighters' records being built.
Yes.
Whether you're a gold medal fighter, whether you're a high-level amateur who's signed to a big promotional company, you look at those early records. I don't see fighters being tested early anymore like we used to. Look, in the 40s and the 50s, you had to fight. It was a career. It was a way to make a living. You didn't just you were a prize fighter. There were fights in the Garden on Tuesday and Friday nights, and then you had your Saturday. Guys fought, 4 times a month. We can name the fighters here over and over and over again that fought, 4 or 5 times a month, because that's how they were making a living.
That was a vocation, just like being a barber or somebody who works in a deli. That was a vocation. And you're right. You're not going to get a Harry Greb anymore that fights like 45 times in a year. It's just, you're not going to get that many club shows and 100%. And now everybody is chasing, that undefeated record, and they're very careful. And the amount of boxers is probably gone down, in that the amount of opponents has gone down. So it's a whole ecology where you can only build a record as many opponents, quote unquote opponents, are on the landscape. And the amount of shows have definitely been drastically reduced because of regulations and insurance costs. And look, and MMA and a lot of other things are going on now.
Yeah. So as far as the amount of shows, right, we come out of similar area. We saw the ESPN, where we had twice a week, ESPN brought up. We had, Showtime, what was it? I want to say After Dark, Showtime After Dark, where they would, put young fighters that were coming up. And we had television at that point where there was some money for the promoter to have a stipend for the event, to put the event on. Today, promotion has become very challenging, even with social media. And what you're saying is right. We have MMA, we have bare knuckle, we have all these different combat sports that are out there now that are challenging boxing. As a promoter here, right? Also, and you working around, tell us a little bit how hard it is. I mean, because at the end of the day, a promoter puts the show on. He's a businessman. He wants to make money.
Has to.
You know, and people don't understand that because they see the promoter, they see the vision of Don King, right?
Yeah.
Right? The average person who doesn't know boxing, right? You'll say, oh, who's Don King, right? That's the first vision that people, you know, maybe Bob Arum if they know a little bit about it, but those were the two big mainstays in boxing, right? For us growing up, right? Putting great events on. A lot of great promoters out there right now, but you know, people don't understand the landscape. Like, okay, what it costs to put a show on,
A lot.
the aggravation, and to make sure, because it's not okay. I got this guy and I got this guy. Well, that fight could fall out a week before the fight. Now you're locked into a venue and everything. Tell us a little bit about the promotional end and educate us there a little bit out, because I think people don't realize what that entails and what, you know, okay, why is there a fighter under a promotional company, we'll call them A, and then a B-side fighter? Because the promotional company is protecting their fighters.
Absolutely. I mean, the promoters almost take the place of the old style managers, which is totally different. So when people say I have a promoter, some people get that confused, especially the young boxers. A promoter is a guy who holds an event. He's not a guy who, quote unquote, manages fighters and brings them to the different events. A promoter is a guy who holds an event and has fighters fight on his event. In order to have these fighters fight on his event, he has to hire someone called a matchmaker. A matchmaker is the guy who gets on a phone or the internet and he calls different fighters or different fighters' managers, hopefully, and to get them to fight a list of guys the promoter says, I want, you know, Joe Smith and Tom Smith and Jim Jones on my show. Find them opponents, here are their weights. This is what we're looking for. So unfortunately, the promoter has to go into his own pocket. There's no magic fund. There's no government fund. There's no stipend. He goes into his own pocket. So when Bryant Pappas goes ahead and holds an event for Valid Boxing, the paycheck Bryant Pappas gets for his other job, he reaches into that and takes the money out, and he has to go ahead and he has to secure a venue. Then he has to go ahead and buy insurance for that venue and liability for the fighters, which varies from state to state. Then he has to pay the referees, the judges. He has to pay the inspectors. He has to pay the timekeeper. Then he also has to pay the fighters. He has to pay, you know, just everything you can imagine.
All down
Table
the line,
rental,
security, everything.
security,
right?
DJ, records, food, alcohol, whatever. And there's licenses for everything that you have to get. And at the end of the night, if you only make, you know, $15,000 and on that show, but the show costs $25,000, well, guess what? You lost money. The only people who really get paid or guaranteed to get paid in boxing is probably the fighters and the commission. They definitely get paid. The fighters and the commission get paid. No one else. I mean, I guess if you have a private contract with these guys, who are you going to rent the ring for if you don't own your ring, the DJ, stuff like that, like those guys will get paid. But the promoter can take a big hit and it's kind of risky. So you really want to have, especially at the lower level, the grassroots level, the club level, you really want a guy who can sell tickets, who can attract people, whether that be through social media or just your local guy, that you can give him 150 printed tickets and he can go ahead and sell those tickets and take a percentage of the tickets as part of his pay, which is really good. But the promoter, as a promoter, you are taking a risk with every show. Look, I've had 4 shows, you know, some have lost a lot of money and 1 or 2 have done okay. I'm going to say fantastic. I'll say okay, because I kind of got into the groove. There definitely is a learning curve there. And you discover very quickly that you need ticket sellers. You definitely need ticket sellers. And like you said, guys drop out of fights. Who gets cut? Who gets injured? Who doesn't show up to be an opponent, you know? I mean, it's tough to find reliable guys.
Who the commission doesn't. And you know what, as the promoter, right? And look, people outside of boxing, they assimilate what boxing is to pay-per-view in these events that they see on TV, right? You made a great point, okay? You're going into your own pocket to fund this thing. You're rolling the dice, okay? As the company's saying, okay, I'm going to you have to secure a good venue where you think that fighters can sell tickets, and you're going to put asses in the seat because we don't have television. giving us. We don't have a stream service like DAZN saying, okay, and we know DAZN will come in and they'll just put their name on it, but they're not going to give you anything. They're going to tag your name to you, right? And say, yeah, we'll work with you. Let's see what you can do. But you have to secure all of this stuff, right, for the venue, and then negotiate the fights, make sure you have the right fights, okay? Like, okay, we want to put a good product out, right? You want to put a good product. So, you want to match fighters as evenly as you can.
Competitive,
right?
sure.
The other factor is like, as a promoter, you're not flying people in, putting them up in these great hotels. You're trying to be as economical as you can to be, look, it is a business to be profitable, but put a good product on. So I think people get disillusioned of, you've been around, you've probably been at really good venues where they put you up, you get great accommodations on some of the big shows, and you're fighting on local shows, and hey, you get this hotel and that, and it is what it is,
100%.
It is what it is.
It's a big difference.
Difference. I get it, but, you do it for the love of the game. And you're funding this, like what people don't understand is not, promoters and managers are not sitting there, like you said, on a magic fund. Like I have discretionary money here. It's the Jake Paul syndrome, right? They forget Jake Paul's a multimillionaire. He doesn't have to be in boxing if he doesn't want to. He is now, but he was okay before he got into boxing. He could have pretty much did anything he wanted to. Sure. He dove into boxing, and I give him a lot of credit. He's making a lot of noise. I like some of the things he's doing as far as to promote the sport and give people a chance to fight, and he's trying to put a good product on. So I kind of see where that's in a positive sense, because I think we're losing momentum with some of the older promoters. Bob Arum no longer on ESPN. Top Rank is not on ESPN now. I got to give it to DAZN. They're putting shows on, and they're on. They have their own app. They're putting constant shows on around the world. Are they the new level of boxing? I don't know. But we're losing those old school promoters, old school trainers, old school fighters, anybody, matchmakers, guys like, been in the business. What's the next upcome? How do we keep it going?
It's difficult. I mean, I guess it used to be that guys would take on an apprentice or somebody and they would teach them. I mean, I remember talking to some, like you said, there's going to be a lot of brain drain here because Don King is pretty much done, right? And then you got Bob Arum going. You have these guys who were really big in the 70s and 80s and made their bones and made their money or whatever, and your Russell Peltz and your other guys. There's really no up-and-coming guys, or if there are, they're not in this country, unfortunately. There's really no career path right now to be a boxing promoter or even a boxing manager, much less a boxer now. It's very difficult. Even if you look on the internet, it's hard to find out how this stuff works.
You got to kind of be in it to really to understand it, right? Because I talk to people and they're like, they don't realize, one, from the training aspect, what these guys go through. They don't realize from the fighter aspect. Okay, you have a great record. Okay, take that record as a Major League Baseball pitcher. They'd be writing checks to you left and right, right?
I wish.
Come on, right?
Yeah.
We both know.
Yeah.
There are fighters, I use this, 20 wins in boxing. It's a great milestone. If you retire as a fighter and you sit one day with your family and your children and they say, oh, man, I had 20 wins as a professional. Wow, really? That's some milestone, I think. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we know there are fighters not making money at that aspect.
There's not.
We know that the old school promoters, Russell Peltz, putting shows on in Philadelphia for years, one of the, outstanding cards in the old Blue Horizon, all through the legendary venues out there. Where does his knowledge go? And all the people that were around him in the game, that he probably had so many different, not only fighters, but people working with him. That's, a historian of the sport now. That how do we fill those voids? And social media, makes everybody look like they're a superstar. You know?
True. It's tough. I don't know the answer, but I mean, just off the top of my head, unfortunately, boxing is probably one of the few sports where you really don't need much of a background or anything in it. There's no prerequisite. Like, so I want to be say I want to be a boxing manager. I didn't have to be a manager or have anything to do with amateur boxing. I want to be a promoter. I never had to promote an amateur boxing show ever. I want to be a professional boxer. In a lot of states, I didn't have to be an amateur boxer. Not all states. It's starting to change a little bit, but that's a whole nother topic. But I think if there was some sort of, we have jobs programs in this country for everything. I mean, if there was some sort of jobs program or some sort of apprenticeship that was available to help the promoters and help people who were interested in boxing, I think that would just be a big deal. And where would that come from? I mean, I don't hate to say it, but I think people who maybe don't have the college degree but are smart guys, people who maybe grew up in boxing or maybe have gotten a little trouble when they were younger. I think if there was some sort of program, and I hate to say rely on the government, but if there was some sort of jobs program that could pair a young man or woman with a promoter or manager and they can mentor that person, or if there was any kind of program open like that, and it doesn't have to be promoted by the government, but in order to help out that promoter, I think that would just be a big deal to getting the next generation of, especially in the United States, of boxing promoters going and be able to replace all these great people that are leaving.
Well, you said a couple of things. I want to touch on a couple of things that you said. First of all, let's talk about the prerequisite to be involved in boxing. Yes, there is none. Okay, so we'll take, the other professional sports out there, Major League Baseball, NFL, NHL, NBA, all unionized. You are not walking down on the field, say, hey, I'm a coach, I'm this or that. Doesn't care how much money you have. Boxing, if you have some discretionary money, you want to become a manager, a guy comes to you and says, hey, Bryant, I got this up-and-coming kid, I need some representation. You've been in the sport. What can you do? Okay? You strike a deal, whatever it is, financially, however you want to represent them, manager, advisor. Promotional company, we'll take Jake Paul. And I'm not disrespecting the guy. Don't take it the wrong way. He took his hard-earned money, however he made it, it's his money, and started MVP Promotions. Okay, it just happens. He has a lot of discretionary money.
Sure.
So he has the ability to survive. You're talking about a lot of promoters out there that are going show to show, trying to survive, trying to find a niche to sell it, that, at the end of the day, boxing people are trying to create a world champion, whether you're a trainer or a promoter, an advisor, whatever it is. Our goal that drives us is not only the sport, but having that one special fighter, being a champion, all that stuff that goes with it. Yeah, there is no prerequisite. We have, unfortunately, felons in this sport through years and years and years, and we can go through history, and that's a whole topic of another conversation that we can have. There's a lot of unsavory people that do things to fighters and promotional things where we hear the stories, the fighters aren't taken care of, promoters run out, they don't pay people, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, there is no regulation. The sport is hard. So even at the promotional level and not the fighter level, what we do is hard. It takes, look, you're promoting, okay, you're working and you're fighting. Think about what you go through. Now, yeah, you're right. You got to get a special person to say, hey, I want to do that. I'm willing to put in the time, because the reward is not in the beginning of the sport and even to the end. We got to get lucky as trainers and promoters and fighters, right? You got to get lucky in this sport. Everybody works hard. You work hard at what you do, your job, what you've done to build your company and your name and your brand and your reputation, right? That doesn't mean there's a financial reward or windfall because of all the hard work you do.
No, unfortunately not.
Right? So, take that off the table, right off the rip. I don't think coming up, people are willing to work that hard for a little reward. That's the whole thing. It's like, okay, man, I'm not doing that. Come on, man. You do a show. We know what it is. I've done amateur shows. I have not run a pro show. Just doing an amateur show that we do every year in the hockey arena here in Danbury is stressful.
Yeah, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we want to put a good product out, dealing with fighters, okay, not so much like you, but anything. We rent the ring. We got to secure the venue, insurance, doctors, commission, people coming in, DJ, who's cleaning, security, ambulance, blah, 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 blah. Everybody comes out of the woodwork when there's a boxing event. You haven't seen these people, fire commission, they all got their hand out. And they're not there shaking your hand.
No.
So, we know what that is. I like your idea of educating. And I think going forward, I believe we all talk with fighters, we all talk with promoters. Fighters are not educated. They think they are. And what I don't mean that they're not educated in their trade of what they're getting into, who they should be signed to, who they should let advise to, what's the next step for their career, what is the best way to go. But, that's boxing right now. I think I have my own opinions on how it should be.
Right.
Which,
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, people, there should be, like, okay, it is a real sport now. And with social media, we're global. Look, you could do a local show in New York. If you're streaming, they could be seeing that show overseas, right? Depending. We're global. Sure. We're global now. And you got to find a way, I guess, to kind of get that balance, but it's still a stressful thing. But I got to ask you a question. You're working, you're still on the job. Right. You're fighting, right? You have fought and, you still train, you're still in the gym. You manage, you advise. Yeah. Why? The promotion. Why promotional? Like, the inside gig of this sport, right? You really know the ins and outs of it, right? We could tell stories, right? Yeah. Listen, people come, right? People say, I want to get involved with boxing. And my answer is I just kid with people. I said, play golf. Why?
I said, why? Why
do
you say that?
Play golf, right? Play golf. It's a cleaner sport, man.
That's what I tell all the young kids. I'm an advisor for the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity in Gettysburg, where I had gone and was a member of. And they said, give advice to these young kids. And I said, learn how to play golf, because more business deals probably get made on a golf course than in a boardroom or an office. Yeah. But why promoting? That's a good question. So I was lucky enough when I first started my professional boxing career, April 2005. Real quick story. I didn't have anybody in New York that really would help me do that. And how I decided to become professional boxing, the fast background on it is I always wanted to be a professional boxer. I wasn't winning any Golden Gloves or anything like that. I wish I did. I didn't. Not for lack of trying. I was very enthusiastic, but I didn't have that talent that some of these guys have. But I did have the OCD where I trained a lot. So I remember after 2000, after 9/11, I was down there as a police officer. My wife was there for quite some time. Unfortunately, I got sick with a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in April 2002. I had to do a chemotherapy in 2004. And I didn't know if this stuff was going to work. I was at Memorial Sloan Kettering, one of the best doctors in the field, Dr. Zelenitz. He's the head of lymphoma services for the past 20 plus years at Sloan Kettering. And he's the guy that develops new drugs to how to combat this stuff. He's a great guy. So I remember saying to myself, well, they tell you when you're diagnosed with any sort of illness, like your prognosis. So this guy's there, this doctor's there, and he's like, the median survival rate's 10 years. And that's all I heard in my head. And I didn't believe it, but apparently everybody else did, from my wife to my mother to my in-laws, because they were in tears. But I didn't believe it. But anyway.
Yeah, they don't sugarcoat it. They give you all the facts.
They tell you, man.
I've been through there with my parents. I know, great institution.
Yeah, but they're fantastic, but they'll tell you straight up. They're not they're not gonna beat around the bush. So I remember going to chemo 2 years later and saying, hey, is this gonna work? And they were like, well, we hope so. But if it does work, it's going to come back. And then it comes, and then just saying, well, once you have like a 10-year time frame to live your life when you're, 27, 28 years old or whatever, you start to accelerate and do things that maybe you would have put off for 10 years or 5 years. So I said, one of the things was, there's a lot of things like get promoted at work and do all this other stuff. But I said, boxing. I'm going to turn professional. So anyway, I get through the chemo and I'm looking to turn professional. Everybody in New York says, kid, you have a college degree, you already have a job, and you're almost 30. No. It's a lot of doors were slammed in my face in New York. And then I found a guy on the internet, right, saying, thank God for the internet, Stacy Goodnight Goodson. He was a promoter.
Out of Arkansas.
Out of Arkansas.
I know
That's right.
Stacy from back in the day.
Yeah. Great guy. And he said to me, he
promoted some big shows back in the day,
he did
too.
A lot of shows, and he had over 70 fights himself. And he said to me, hey, no one in New York is helping you? I said, no. He said, you were down in 9/11, and this is pretty fresh, 9/11 in everybody's mind. I said, yeah. And he said, and they still won't help you. I said, no. He said, wow, that's a shame. That's a crime. That's horrible. You come down here, and I'm going to help you. So there you go, April 2005. I didn't tell anybody at work. I had my brother fly out from California, and I fought, I think his name was Stephen Crane, and I think we're in Wichita, Kansas at the Mid-American Indian Center. I didn't know what I was getting involved in, but I won. Second round, I think, knockout or TKO or knockout, and I was hooked from that point on. I said I should have done this all along. But I guess once I moved on from there, boxing, he taught me a lot. He was kind of like my mentor and just a great guy and Mr. Boxing. And I'll tell you, I just said, wow, I can do a lot with boxing. I love it.
He was like Barnum and Bailey.
He really,
back in the day.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to him. I never met him personally, but back in the day, I remember speaking to him.
Great guy.
Because, like you, right, I'm looking for areas to put fighters where, if you're not getting mainstream with the big-time promoters up here at the time, where are we going to fight?
Where are you going to fight? Out of state. You have to go out of state. And he was just a great, great man and still is. And I'll tell you, after that, boxing, and then he protected me. So when people see the record, like, whoa, you got, 23, 2-1. Oh my God, and I say, look, don't get excited. I'm not patting myself on the back. Look, I did climb through the ropes, 26 times or whatever it was, 24, 25 times. I said, but I had a great manager. And that's number one. You got to have a great manager in the pros. You have to have a manager that actually cares about you.
Manager?
Stacy Goodson.
Okay. He
so
did.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
great.
he was my manager. And then him and I had the same vision. And Stacy even would tell me, look, I'm not trying to get you hurt. We'll go and do what you want, but I'm not going to get you, I'm not setting you up to get smashed and beat up and embarrassed on HBO, and I said, sounds good to me. And then I discovered that I could sell tickets in New York, and that's when Star Boxing and Ron Katz would call me because I could sell a lot of tickets. And, I had some interesting fights there and a lot of fun. And, I fought everywhere and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And then I had some downtime and I started, fighters would come to me and say, I want to be like you. You have a great record and it looks like you have somebody behind you that cares for you. Can you do the same thing with me? And fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of the fighters are great. There was a couple that weren't so great that you kind of help these fighters out and they get their 4 or 5 wins or 7 wins and then they're gone. They're gone somewhere else. Either they stop fighting or they decide they want another manager and they
Right.
figure out real fast the grass is not greener when they either never fight again or they take 2 losses and you never see them. But I just saw a lot of a need for a good manager and I got involved in managing. And then I said, I'm going to have my own show. And I think the reason is because I had managed some guys. And like you said, I wanted to put them somewhere where they would be treated fairly. And I said, well, who's going to treat them fairer than me? Let's try to do a show. We've done everything else. We worked corners, cuts, fought, managed. Let me try a show. And I had like these 2 shows. They weren't well attended. I struck gold with the 3rd show. It all came together with my 3rd show last November with Chris Glenn as the main event. And he sold a lot of tickets, Jordan Day also from the area sold a lot of tickets, So I think that it started as wanting to help the fighters and say, hey guys, I can get you on a show and you're not going to be a opponent there to get beat to death. You're going to have a fair shot. And I would take guys that maybe don't have the best records and I would match them up. And those were some of the best fights on the shows. I would match up an 0-2 against an 0-2. And you couldn't look on BoxRec and see one side be all green and one side be all red at the end of the deal. I would mix the corners up because I didn't know who was going to win a lot of these fights. And that's what you alluded to before. Boxing was guys that would fight each other and they would be pretty even fights. And I think that what is missing, and I think MMA has a lot of that now. They don't really rely on the glossy records. But I will say this in defense of boxing, not that boxing needs to be defended. You know, if you get matched to the death for your first 7 or 8 fights, you're going to be 4-4 with an eye injury, and you're going to be out of the sport. Boxing is MMA is a lot of injuries, a lot of superficial injuries. Boxing, the injuries stay with you because you usually have a longer career, and they affect the brain a lot. I mean, MMA, you may get a dislocated shoulder, you may get your knee, your ankle, you may have tendon and ligament damage, absolutely cauliflower ears. But boxing, 20 years down the line when you can't tie your shoes, that's a problem. Or the most common injury in boxing is the eye injuries. So we see a lot of states that are tougher in the matchups, that they really want the guys like almost dead even, like in Nevada or New York or Pennsylvania. We see a lot more injuries in those states, and then people will counter with, well, you want to take a guy, and I won't name any states, but you want to take a guy down south and get him a win over a guy who never had gloves on or a guy that really doesn't know how to fight. And I'm like, yes, I understand that, but building fighters, there is an art to it where you want to build a guy and then you want to test the guy. You don't want the guy just to,
Listen, you have to. I agree. Like that part people don't understand, right? We know some records are really lopsided. We know certain fighters are just whatever the case may be. But back to the building of the fighter, you have to see what that individual has. If you put them in hard too fast, okay? And especially coming out of an amateur background, maybe not so heavy of an amateur background, you want to see what you have.
Want to see what you have. I always point to David Reed. I really liked it. The American Dream, right? Gold medalist, everything. They matched this guy so hard that he was done. He was done after, I think the Trinidad fight and stuff, and he got damage to his eye, and it just couldn't get past that. And I always said, even at that time, people were whispering about, wow, they're really matching him tough. Look how much more longevity he could have had.
But does that go right here? And this is another aspect of it. You have people behind you, and the fighter is the fighter. That's the business in front of you. What people don't realize, the fighter's the business. Without the fighter, there's no promoter, there's no advisor, manager, there's no television, whatever, because if that guy don't fight.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have all these people involved behind a fighter. And I see when they fast track a fighter, are they looking to cash out? Are they looking for the big opportunity? Look, building a fighter is fight, as well as I do. Fights have to make sense, right? Every fight has a value, whether you fight 4 rounds, 6, 8, or 10, and they have a meaning. You take a fighter, you don't make him fight 8 rounds or 10 rounds in his first fight. You bring him 4.
Sure.
Okay? Maybe he didn't do as well in the 4, you bring him another 4. If he starts progression, okay, maybe you bring him to a 6, and you start moving him along eventually up to 10 rounds, right? And
yeah.
Better and better and better competition, right? Because the only way to improve is if we see the competition. Now you say, okay, I got a kid. We can maybe put him in a little hard. Let's test him.
Sure.
Right? But also a test to me is I see fighters and they'll shy away from a fight. Look, take that fight. That fight's a win-win. If you win, great. If you lose but fight well losing, you still win.
You still win, yeah.
Because now people say, hey, he's for real.
He's for real, absolutely.
He's for real.
He belongs.
Yeah. So you know what? You're going to get another opportunity. If you go out there and crap an egg, well, that's not good, but you still maybe might get another opportunity. So, the art of building a fighter, from behind the scenes, whether as a promoter, an advisor, a manager. I don't like to say manager, I like to say advisor. There is an art with the good guys out there. And, being out of New York, what I think people don't see also, we know, you've been in the gyms all through the boroughs and Jersey, wherever. Look, we know there are fighters in that gym that can whip ass on fighters that we see that are under contract.
There really are. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? you go into some of these gyms, right? And I been in gyms where there are guys who are not even pro fighters. They're just in there working rounds. They'll put it on guys.
Yeah.
And I think what we see, you're talking about MMA, and I've been able to work with some MMA fighters now. So UFC being the top level, there is no other. There's no WBA. Like UFC is the benchmark, right?
Right.
They have these little pocket companies coming up now, Reality, Victory. They're the feeding ground for them. Those guys are not building fighters. They're matching hard fights because Dana White, right, even on the Contender Series and everything else, he puts hard fights because he figures that if you're going to get a UFC contract, you really need to deserve that contract. We're not handing them out just because you have a great social media or you can sell tickets or anything else. So you got to have some savvy to it. And I think there's kind of a niche of what everybody does because for me, I love underdog stories. All right. I love fighters that come in and whip the A side, whatever the case may be. Because like you said before, we train fighters to win fights. I don't care who you're fighting. If we take that fight, we have the mentality we can win that fight. We're not going there to say, we're just going to do 8 rounds.
No, we're not going to lose.
We're not going to lose, and we're not training to lose.
No, absolutely.
But you're in the promotional end, you're in the advising end at a different level, and your career speaks for helping people. What are you seeing out there when you talk to these young fighters today? And for you, what is your criteria if you're looking for a fighter to advise or, say, hey, we have a show, we'd like to have you on? What are you looking for out there?
Okay, so when I'm interested in a fighter, I mean, obviously, can he fight? There's various levels.
Number one credential, can you fight?
Can you fight?
Yeah, it's got to be, that's a non-negotiable.
I mean, you really want a guy that's easy to deal with. I mean, some guys are really, really good fighters, but they're very difficult to deal with. Guys, they always think you're trying to get one over on them. They always think there's a scam. Because they're scamming people, or guys are asking for money up front before they even sign a contract, or, a lot of times the fighters, they'll have they'll have watched, well, this is, a long time ago, but they'll watch like those HBO specials. So they'll think like a lot of times the young fighters, even though they haven't won the Golden Gloves or any gold medal, they'll want a signing bonus and they'll want that. And I'm like, wait a second, there's no signing bonus anymore. This is done, You really want a fighter that's in the gym. You want a guy that's in shape. You don't want a guy that says, I got to lose 20 or 30 pounds, or I got to lose 20 pounds and get back into it. You want a guy that's in the gym, stays in the gym. And you want a guy that's not in trouble. You don't want a guy that owes money in child support and got his license suspended, or he wants to ask you for money because he has no car, or, you don't want a guy that says he's on parole. You got to talk to his probation or parole officer. It's kind of like a red flag for me. Also, in this day and age, I guess social media is big. So if I see a guy on social media that's really bad with some of the language and things that he says, that's like an automatic no. And I tell these guys that. I'm like, look, if you have a social media and you're using certain words or terms, or you're talking bad about people or singling people out as a group or individually, like, it's got to stop now, because I can't be involved with that professionally and personally. That's not my thing. I want to run the other way. And the social media kind of is almost a revealer of the guy's personality, because a lot of people, sometimes these young fighters have temper tantrums on social media. If a guy gets in a fight with his girlfriend, he'll start talking like really crazy stuff about the girl on social media. You got to just run the other way when it comes to that. So that actually goes along with a contract that I have these guys sign if I'm to represent them, that they have to clean up the social media. They can't put any disparaging comments about me, and I won't put any about them on social media, so it protects both of us. So that's one of the many things we do. I also ask the guys, and I have available in the contract, sometimes we have a minimum number of bouts per contract. That's more of a promoter thing, but we do offer that. We do offer a 401k. We do offer a 529k, an educational thing, if they want it. Most guys don't, but sometimes I just set it up for these guys anyway. Nobody really offers a retirement plan for fighters. There's no union. And then when you tell them the 401k, you can't access it to your 59, they kind of like...
They look at you like, what the hell?
Yeah, that's 1,000 years from now.
Yeah, but in those 1,000 years, we know fighters who have fought and made purses who have a dime to them.
That's correct.
And are struggling right now.
If they put that money away, right, even just a little bit every purse.
So the fact that you're offering that is big and a caring aspect. And you're right. Fighters don't have a union. You know, in Major League Baseball, you're vested, I believe, after I'm not sure if it's 5 or 10 years. You're vested. Okay, so you're going to get a retirement check from them.
That's great.
Whether you make the major leagues or not, you could be in the minors for 10 years and you're going to get something. You know, we go back to the same thing, 20 professional wins. That's an eternity for a lot of guys. You know, you're fighting a long time. Guys who fought 30, 40 years, you know, and you walk away with the game with nothing. So that's pretty admirable that you put in there. But fighters, we know, think for the moment. They don't think for the future.
They do. They do. It's definitely a sport where the guy wants it now is instant gratification. And I think that, like I said, just picking some of these fighters out, you want a guy with a good work ethic. You kind of want a guy that's unburdened by other things. And I think, number one, easy to deal with, a guy that lives the right way and doesn't have any vices, whether it's drinking, smoking, or whatever other stuff. And I think the other, it's just a guy that's just honesty. You just want honesty. But with a fighter also, sometimes that fighter is not who you're dealing with. You have to deal with a trainer or a cousin or an uncle who's feeding him information maybe that doesn't know exactly how the sport works or the business works. So that's tough to go by. So it should really be a one-on-one relationship, and the trainer obviously has to be involved in that as well.
But you know what? You made a good point. You're not always dealing with the fighter. There's always people in the fighter's ear. You know, so in the days of signing bonus, forget that shit. You're not getting a signing bonus, okay? It's not realistic or conducive to these promoters today to lock you up with money. And there are a lot of ins and outs of the contract, which we're not really going to go into, but you got to deal with their camps. You know, you should be, they all know better than you, right? Yeah.
Right.
But again, as the promoter or the advisor, you're footing the bill for everything. Because look, at the end of the day, we want fighters to be successful. And I'm sure, knowing you a little bit, you've went into your pocket to pay a cell phone bill or put food on somebody's table or get them to an event, buy gear, because fighters don't always have what they need to be successful.
No.
And also the building aspect of a fighter, it's just not the fighter. You have to worry about, you know, maintaining a good social media, maintaining a good fitness aspect of it. Some of them, their diets suck. We got to cut weight. How do we cut weight? Some of them need a strength coach. You know, there's a lot of factors into. You just don't show up to the gym and say, okay, I'm going to do my rounds today and my workout and I'm out. It's a total lifestyle. People don't realize, again, what the behind the scenes guys, you're dealing with that. Because at the end of the day, that fighter is representing your brand, so you want him to be successful.
You want him to win.
Yeah, you want him to win.
You said, you don't train the guys. The guys don't train to lose. Nobody trains to lose. You want the guy to win without underdogs, without, you know, these less than 50-50 matchups. There'll be no Leon Spinks beating Muhammad Ali with like 8 fights, right? There'll be no Pete Rademacher who lost but challenged Floyd Patterson. There'll be no James Braddock. There'll be no Buster Douglas without
Buster
these underdog
Douglas,
guys.
right? You know, and that's the thing. Like, and being a fighter or being involved in the game, we know, okay, how can you send a kid? We've seen other people send kids in unprepared. We've seen people in different commissions pull people off the street. Hey, you're fighting tonight. I heard a great old-time story, and I'm not going to use the person's name because I'll tell you off camera because you'll know who it is, right?
Okay.
And this is a great old-time story. They're doing a show, right, and a fight falls out. And this is back in the day, okay? Right. Guy comes in to deliver pizza and food to everybody in the meeting, and the kid's, you know, in good shape. And he goes, hey, how much do you make delivering pizza? The kid tells him, goes, how'd you like to make double of that tomorrow night?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they throw him in.
I've heard these stories.
They throw him in, okay?
They'd pick, I remember reading about, they would like get a guy that was in the audience because the guy fell through or his blood pressure was too high, and they'd go, do you want to fight tonight? You know, and but like you said, kids from the street, that's an issue. That's an issue because if you know, obviously the medicals are different for every state, right? I think that boxing, as far as safety goes, the number one injury in boxing seems to be an eye injury, detached retinas, and even amateurs are getting them now from excessive, in my opinion, excessive sparring, or excessive hard sparring, I should say. But I'm just waiting for the technology to catch up, where we can do something between rounds to just check on the fighter's brain. You know, I'm sure there's something out there that'll be ready very soon to do this. Whether or not boxing employs it or wants to pay for it, totally different matter. But safety is paramount. And I would say that also there's another side to the coin. When we match these kids up off the street, they could get hurt. You know, it depends. A lot of it depends. But when you match these 50-50 guys, you get Gaddy Ward, you get a beautiful fight, but you get both fighters damaged. You know, you get a lot of damage. I mean, you look at a state like Nevada, I think they lead in fighter deaths, you know, in the country. And because the commission's tough, like they want 50-50 fights. I get it. We want a competitive fight. Not every single fight has to be to the death. Not every single card has to look like, you know, an improvised explosive device went off on the side of the road in Afghanistan at the end of the fight with everyone getting stitched up. Sometimes guys go down south or another commission. I won't even pick on the South. They go and they fight these guys, lower level guys. You know, I may have a pro debut. He may, in my pro debut, may have 20 amateur fights, and he may fight a 1-in-5, and that 1-in-5 just has 1-in-5 fights as a pro. He doesn't have any amateur fights, and people may say, "Oh, that's not right." But you know, here's the thing: when there's a blatant mismatch, especially in states where the referees kind of know this may happen when you build a guy up, the referees really pay attention. And if one guy really overwhelms the other guy without knocking him down, he doesn't have to knock the guy down and beat the guy to death. A lot of times the referees will say, well, this is a mismatch, I'm going to stop this, which is fine. A lot of times those life and death struggles result in real injury. And, you know, we get the MRI, we get the CT scan, we get the dilated eye exam signed by an ophthalmologist, not the optometrist at some of these. We get the EKG. And it doesn't save the fighters a lot of times. It's just the damage that happens in the ring from these dead even fights, which are awesome, beautiful fights, matched up perfectly. They can hurt a lot of guys. And if you're building a guy up, that may not be the way you want to build your guy up, with a life and death from his first fight to his 5th or 6th. Yeah.
But also, you know, a good point, you know, as a coach, as a fighter, I think sparring is very excessive today, more so than it's a badge of honor in a lot of gyms and a lot of these coaches.
I'm glad you said that. It's a bad. They do. The kids today say, "I won sparring." I shake my head at that.
So, you know, my take on sparring and being in camps at many levels and watching a lot of coaches and taking a little bit of this and this. Look, getting a fighter ready for a fight, whatever it is. You know, there's a plan for the training. If you're training for a 4-round fight, a 6, an 8, a 10, the amount of rounds you want to have for sparring, what you really think, who your opponent is. Beating your brains out in the gym is not learning the fight game.
It's not.
You have to test your craft. I get it. We have to have a scrimmage, like we will call it in another sport. You have to go in there. I have to see how you're responding. Are you in shape? Because we know if we're training guys, a good trainer is going to be around his guy, is going to know what he's like, what he's doing. If he's in shape, if he's screwing around, if he's drinking, if he's doing, you're going to know. You should know. Let's put it that way. You should know, right? So I have to find out. I have to find out what you're made of after all this hard training. I have to see, you know, and we know sparring is not about beating the other guy. I don't care. I calculated by, in the beginning of camp, if you're rusty, are you putting in what we're implementing as the plan? Okay, if I see that, okay, let me see your conditioning. Let me see how you respond as we bring a little harder sparring in and the guy tests you and you get hit. How are you responding? And then as we get closer to the fight, as you're peaking. For me, I'm a little superstitious. I want the last sparring. Guys want you to be sharp. I'll take if you're a little not so sharp in the last spar. I kind of feel a superstition. I don't want you flat.
Right.
But I'm not going to be worrying if we're peaking through the middle bit of sparring with better opposition in the sparring. I can gauge you and say, okay, we're sparring better than we're fighting. Sure. That's how I kind of gauge it. But I also know with certain guys, you don't want to continually spar. Like, I don't want to hear, when we're going to spar. Listen, you're going to spar when we decide it's right for you to spar.
Right.
Okay? And at a professional level, it is part of the camp. But building fighters from the amateur to early professional, if there's no fights, we'll pick and choose the sparring. I don't need you in wars in the gym because we know some coaches take sparring. Like, I don't. I tell my guys, we're working. We need to work on this stuff. Okay? Look, hit like you get hit. If that guy hits you, you got to hit him. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying give him a pass. Right. But we're not going to war.
Sure. No,
we're not going in there to spar, say, hey, we're sparring with Bryant today. I want you to fuck him up.
Right.
I want you to kick his ass.
Right.
I want you to beat him down till he stops. No, we're not taking that mentality. I want you to work on what we've been working on and see if you can pick up that. But I think fighters today, my own opinion, okay, listen, at 8, 9 years old, 7 years old, I see kids in the gym fighting, tournaments, this. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's too young.
I think okay, eventually you're being and even these young kids that are playing football today, CTE is a big, I'm not saying you shouldn't, don't get me wrong, but I think it should be really watched. I had Peter McNeely on the show, great guy, doesn't remembered everything. But you know what? He was in camp months and months, played football as a young, exposed to head trauma over and over and over again. Think about it. If somebody came in and hit that chair with the baseball bat, eventually that corner of that chair is going to break.
Sure.
Your body's like that. If you're going to keep taking trauma, something's going to happen.
I tell these guys, the brain does not callous. You can't get it stronger by getting it hit. Some guys think I have to make up for lost time because I didn't spar last week. I have to do 15 rounds, say whatever it is. It doesn't work that way.
No, and then we don't know, we're trainers and everybody's a little bit of a witch doctor, right? We don't know what's going on in there. We're not physicians, we're not scientists, we're not people monitoring that. We don't know. I mean, you can fight a beautiful fight, right? And walk out, maybe come back in a couple weeks later, guys are sparring again. Why?
Yeah. There's no need for it.
You don't know what happened into your brain. You don't know. We don't do an MRI after each fight.
That's correct.
Why?
Maybe they should. I was just,
right? Maybe not in every fight,
but
think about it. For every title fight, which is 12 rounds, right? You should be MRI'd before and after. If that fight's a war, think about the Gaddy Ward fights. Those fights were wars. God bless both those guys. Warrior fights, put some of the greatest events out there on. Think about the, trauma they went through.
A lot of trauma, and I think that you're right. It's kind of boxing. I don't want to say they wash their hands of it, but they kind of do. So they say, well, you're in shape to fight, and then after the fight, okay, goodbye, go home. I mean, it happened with Magomed in New York. He came out of the ring, he lost, right? He starts throwing up and all this stuff, and they made the wrong call. They have an ambulance there, and they said, if we send you in the ambulance, we got to shut the show down till another ambulance comes up. Take a cab. And look what happened to him. Unfortunately, it was horrible. It was a travesty, and it was wrong. And people got fired over it, rightfully so. And New York Commission got sued. New York State got sued, and they reached a settlement, rightfully so. But that man's life will never be the same. His family's life will never be the same. I mean, I'm a big proponent of guys being safe. And like you said, the sparring, it just adds up. The hard sparring. And there's no boxing season. It's not like football season. The season is 365 days a year. That's the season.
Especially if you're coming up, you got to be in the gym, got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. You're waiting for a fight. Look, if you're at the level of a promoter who's got you under contract to say, hey, you're going to fight, 3 fights this year, 4 fights, whatever it is, you got to be in the gym. But some of these guys that are up and coming, they're hoping for opportunities. That opportunity doesn't come. It's not sent to you 3 months in advance. Hey, Brian, we got a fight coming up. We're going to give you. They call you a week, 2 weeks, a month out. If you're not ready, now you're struggling.
Yeah, then you're not ready. Yeah.
And that's why I like certain underdog fighters. They're in the gym because we can creep up on those guys. We can creep up on them.
Yeah, that's like you said. It's especially with the fighters who tend to be very overweight between fights, and that's a little difference between the amateur and the pros. Also, is that the pros are usually, I don't want to say they're overweight. They're heavier. Their quote unquote walk around weight is heavier because they have more than 24 hours to rehydrate. So the challenge is you don't want them so heavy that the 8 weeks of camp, if they're hopefully have 8 weeks of notice or more, becomes the weight loss camp. And then the skills camp is the last 2 weeks.
No, you can't. You made a great point there. You know, I've been blessed to work with a little bigger fighters, but some of the younger fighters, like before we know a fight's coming in, like where camp is coming up, and weight is maybe an issue or we got to cut. If, you know, we know, you and I, some fighters work for a living, so they're not always in the gym. They're not always fight ready when a fight's going to come up. So they might walk around a little heavier, or, you know, they're working their job. Maybe they're not eating as good or training as hard right now. The first couple of weeks of camp at that point, it's got to be, you got to get in shape. We can't waste time in camp getting you in shape. When we got to waste time in camp to getting you in shape, we're losing time on the technical aspect. You as a fighter are struggling mentally with the weight issue in your head. So any of your learning process is being shut down because every day you're worrying about, I got to drop pounds, I got to drop pounds. And we know if it's a bigger fight, money is being taken at the scale. Even at the smaller fights, you're going to lose money.
You're going to lose money.
But the more money you're making in that fight, the more money you have the potential to lose at the scale. So now that becomes a struggle with that. And, you know, weight cut's a whole different issue with a lot of guys. I don't even want to go into that because there's a lot of pros and cons.
A lot of stuff to it. Yeah, the weight cut, it's just, I was never really in favor of the drastic cuts. But I will say this, I also don't like, because you can't do it now. I don't like a fighter that weighs like I weigh, you know, say I walk around at 170. I don't like a guy walking around and just fighting at that weight in the professional ranks, because if I get in the ring at 170, the guy who weighs 170 with me the day before, he's a 180 or 185.
Yeah,
and that's
100%.
just dangerous. And they just, you know, there's something about these guys, they're just bigger. They just have bigger bones, heavier bones, bigger attachments, heavier attachments, and they're just bigger, more robust skeletal frame, tendons and ligaments. It's just a bigger person. So you're really just fighting a bigger person, and that does open the smaller guy up to an injury. And he's just going to feel the effects of a guy 15 pounds heavier than him hitting him. I mean, if I could weigh 185 and get down to 170 in a safe manner, I mean, that's a lot of weight, 15 pounds. I mean, it depends how you lose it, and how you rehydrate it, like you said. But it
depends on the fighter.
Yeah.
You know, right? We know there are some fighters, okay, he walks at 185, but we know he can make that weight cut at 15 because he does the right thing.
Some guys can do it.
Some guys can do it, right? It's their body structure, it's their DNA. But it's the ones that get up that high that we got to struggle to make it, and then change it up, and then we're draining them out. So that's a whole nother aspect of fighting. But, you know, kind of flipping it a little bit, you're deep in this game, even as a fighter working now, you know, management, promoter. How did you maintain your career like this? I mean, you know, being a fighter is hard enough, you know, going in the ring 23 times more with, you know, how did you maintain working and the mental aspect of all of this to prepare yourself daily? Because, you know, you got a family, married, got a career,
married,
you know, and your
married,
career is demanding. It's not, you know what I mean?
It wasn't easy, but I just had not that I did it. I'm a boring guy. Like I don't go out. I don't go on weekend trips with the guys. I don't go out to the bars at night like the other younger guys did when I was younger at the job. I didn't do that. I just wanted to be home or at the gym. And I was just lucky enough and fortunate enough that my family was just very supportive. I think my wife told me, I think I had like maybe after my first 4 or 5 fights or something, I said, I want to, you know, keep doing this. And she said, well, then don't lose. That's the only way you're getting permission. Don't lose. I want to see you come home beat up. And, you know, my son was born and everything, and he's been great, and he's been rooting me on. He showed up to some of my fights. He worked my corner for a bunch of my fights, but it is tough to balance it. I'd like to tell people this, and they see it and they believe it. When I get up in the morning, I'm on the phone. I hate being on the phone, but I am on the phone either calling or texting somebody, and I'm going to work. I'm calling or texting somebody with boxing stuff. And I'm at work and I do my work and I do everything and I leave and I'm calling or texting. When I'm at the gym, I got the headphones. I'm that guy in the gym with the headphones on, whether the boxing gym or running or whatever I'm doing, weights or resistance training. So yeah, it's kind of like you have to, especially if you have another job. I'm not retired yet. I'd like to be at some point, but it's just 24/7. You really, I mean, I've gotten calls. I had a call from a fighter, on a midnight on a Thursday, and he said, I need X amount of money or else I'm getting kicked out of my house or whatever it was. And I went, whoa. And then you're on Facebook, you're a message, and I call this guy at 4 a.m, get to this city right now. They're going to have that money if you want this fight. Yes. So I saved that guy from getting kicked out of his house. I was happy about that. But yeah, it's a 24/7 thing. And I've done a lot. I'm a little fish in a big pond, right? I'm like you ask Bob Arum who I am, he's going to say, who's that guy? I get it.
But this is the thing with boxing, right? And I don't mean to interrupt you right here, but I got to do it at this. Without these little guys,
right,
there is no Bob Arum.
There is
no Don
That's
King.
right.
No, I'll use, Russell Peltz. A lot of people might not know who Russell Peltz is. We do, as in boxing, we know what he's done and the people he has helped, the fighters that he has helped to make them better. But yeah.
Yeah, it's the ecology of boxing. It's almost a food chain. It's totally the ecology. I agree. I mean, I've done, boxing, managing, promotion, agent, training, this, that, a lot of different things. I love all the different aspects of the sport. I will continue to do this and to try to help the guys. And I really enjoy it. Look, would I like to work for a commission one day? Yeah, I would. I would like to work for a commission one day. Who wouldn't? Because the commission is the only person that's guaranteed to get paid. They're the only people who really get paid, guaranteed.
But
is
it work for a commission to kind of have a voice and a position to really help the sport in the way that you see might be,
I think it does.
Beneficial?
I think it does. It's funny you mention that. It would, because I think that I've done some things over the years with different commissions where I opened my big mouth and said something or stomped my feet.
Right.
And, New York State, right? New York State has a written down, very concise, very clear gloving policy. And that's because of me. You can look that up, what happened to me in 2012. And the IG's office came to my house and interviewed me, and somebody brought in gloves they shouldn't have used against me. So I said something. I said something about it. So New York State IG's office did an investigation. So New York State now has a policy on that. The Maryland Commission, which is an awesome commission. New York State's fine. I like New York State Commission. They're good. Maryland Commission, very good as well. They now have a policy because of me, because I had a fighter there, and we asked, well, my fighter, he has limited amateur experience. What does this guy you want to match him with have? Oh, he has no amateur experience. We try to look the guy up. We couldn't find anything. Yeah, the guy at amateur fights 20 years ago before USA put their stuff online. You're talking prior to 2008. And so we didn't know. So what did I do? I said, something's wrong. My guy got beat in the first round. This guy knew how to fight. He wasn't a guy with 0 amateur fights. So I said, well, let me try to Freedom of Information Act, this guy's federal ID thing where you have to put down your amateur record. So I did the FOIA request through the state of Maryland. They'd never seen one, which I thought was strange. But they responded, and I get the federal stuff, and it turned out the guy had 70 fights as an amateur. So now Maryland has this deal where if you're going to claim that you have these fights, you have to prove it. You have to prove an amateur background to get that federal ID, like New York has now. They didn't have it when I turned pro. You didn't have to give them the amateur passbook. But I think all that is good, and it stops people from lying. So anything that stops people from lying in the sport of boxing is good, because boxing is unlike other sports. Like, you can lie about a guy's age for the Little League World Championships and no one's going to get a concussion and be killed from it, But if you lie that a guy had no amateur fights and he had 70, you could really hurt somebody.
Exactly.
You could really hurt somebody bad, especially if the referee or we're not aware of that. So anything that can help is always good. Anything that could hold people accountable. But I have dealt with commissions in the past, and I had just a book full of ideas that I had for the various commissions on how to kind of improve boxing with not making it harder, making it actually easier and less expensive for the promoters to do their job and to make things happen. And I have a whole list of things that should be and I think should be available. And I also think there should be a complaint, like in the police department. If you have a complaint, you go to internal affairs, or you go here, you go there, and there's a civilian complaint review board in New York City. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's an avenue. So if I made a complaint on a commission, I had this experience. If I make a complaint on, say, Commission X, well, who do I make the complaint to? Well, I make the complaint to Commission X, the person I'm complaining about. So what are they going to do? They're going to say,
it's going under the pile.
They're going to say, yeah, okay, we'll put this in the paper shredder, and that's what happens. So I think there should be an independent body associated with these state commissions that investigate these sort of things. Now there's not. There's a lot of different things that can definitely improve boxing on the level of the individual states. As far as a national commission goes, a lot of guys like the idea. I'll tell you the truth, I'm very lukewarm on it. I kind of don't, because I think you can't really police. You can't police boxing in West Virginia like you could in New York, So if you start demanding like MRIs and CTs and EKGs and the 7 blood panel thing in West Virginia for those guys, those promoters there, you're not going to have boxing in West Virginia anymore.
Yeah.
But you can do it in a bigger market like New York. So that's the freedom we have in different states. If I can't do a show, like as a promoter, if I want to do a show in New York, I'm paying for insurance. I will pay $30,000 out of my pocket. I will not get that money back. Not even if one person, if no one gets hurt, you don't get the money back. You $30,000 in insurance, you're gone. Now, if I want to go to West Virginia and have a show, I can have a show in West Virginia with the liability for the venue and an alcohol liability with the alcohol's mine, $3,500. I mean, what's not to, and in West Virginia, their commission is awesome. That commission is really good, and they will.
But they also had great fighters come out of West Virginia. It is a fight town.
It is a fight town, and they just had the latest guy is Dakota Linger, who upsets everybody. What, he upset Scooby, upset Josue Vargas. They can fight. Those guys.
We saw Brian Minto.
Yeah.
We saw Brian Minto make a run.
That's right.
In the heavyweight division out of there.
Another big heavyweight.
So, and I'm not overlooking anyone else. I know there have been good fighters that have come out of that area.
It's just
they should be entitled to be able to, like you said, they can't be compared to the New York market where, it's bigger, a vast area. They have to fall under. But I think what you're saying makes sense. Should there be guidelines for the commissions all to follow? Yeah. Maybe we have tiers, A, B, and C if you're an A, promoters in this region or whatever. But there has to be a criteria, like you said, and boxing isn't. The landscape is...
It's a Wild West kind of.
Yeah, it's at all levels with that. But, what advice as a promoter, manager, mentor in boxing? I'm not even going to say all of these things because you've worn so many different hats from, fighter.
Right.
And, well, actually, before I get to that, I want to ask you one question here. What was your most memorable fight? I'm gonna transition it back to you real quick,
all right,
because we talked about everything, but in your career, what was your most memorable fight?
Ooh, there was a bunch of times. I was July 2011. I had a back surgery that February. I came back. I fought a main event at the Paradise Theater. That was great. I got a draw with Alan Medina. I thought I won, but that was very memorable. But honestly, the most memorable fight I had, I'll tell you, it was my third pro fight. It was the first one in New York, and that was August, I believe, 26, 2005 in White Plains, the county center. My first fight in New York. I was fighting a guy. His actual name was Dwayne Reed. That was his name, like the drugstore.
The drugstore, yeah.
And when we weighed in, Dwayne Reed was right there next to 123 William Street, and I showed him where it was. He couldn't believe it. But anyway, that was a memorable fight because I sold a lot of tickets for that fight, and the whole police department was there. The commissioner, Bob Taggart, one of the great commissioners the Yonkers Police Department ever had, was there. And, it was just everyone was there. The family was there. Everyone was there, and it was perfect. I was in the newspaper, and I'll tell you, at the time I was a young police officer. I worked a foot post on Lawrence Street in Yonkers, and I was eating the next 2 days later or something. I was with my partner, Mike Papaleo, who was in my corner. And I remember eating, and these two kids from Lawrence Street who had probably been in trouble before, they came up to us in the diner, and we kind of looked at them like, what's going on? And they said, we saw you in the paper. We wanted to say that's what's up. That's what's up. We're like, oh, all right. So there was a lot of respect there. And it was very memorable for me because it was kind of like, I fought twice before that. I fought in April and in May. The one fight, the first pro debut in Wichita, Kansas, the second one being at the Polk County Fairgrounds in Arkansas. And when I went back to work, I had photos, right? I had those remember those old school digital cameras, right? And I had photos, and I don't think the guys believed that I had fought. Like some of the guys, there's a lot of haters in boxing. Some of the guys didn't believe I fought. They were like, wait a second, you didn't tell anybody and you turned pro and you fought on Saturday? Yeah, right, I want to see the film. So there are some haters there as well in different jobs. You'll find them everywhere in boxing. So when I fought at the county center, they announced me as 2-0 with 2 knockouts, which I was. And I won by first round knockout of that. It was in the newspaper, and it was just a big deal. And it kind of was like a culmination of just getting off chemotherapy in December of 2004. And it was just kind of like, it closed a chapter of the book of being sick and cancer and wanting to do this. And it opened up a whole new chapter for me and a whole new chapter of possibilities. I think that was probably my most memorable fight. And the guy was this guy looked like a bodybuilder that I was fighting. He was cut.
Yeah.
And I remember even my buddies told me afterwards, we saw this guy and we said, this don't look so good. And I just thought it was pretty funny but that was probably my most memorable fight.
But see, that's the great thing about boxing, right? Whether you're a fighter and the possibilities. The boxing world is it's a great community. You got to be in it. I've made some great relationships and friendships over the years, and I'm sure you have also, and it drives you. It's not, again, you have a career. Boxing, people say they don't understand the amount of time we put into this game. And you were talking about it like I'm the same as you. I'm on the phone, I'm half asleep, I'm talking, I'm thinking, what's next? Before you came in today, I had a fighter call me randomly out of the blue. I'd like to meet with you and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. So we do this. It's not a way we make our living. Honestly, if you said, okay, I'm not going to be a police officer anymore, or, whatever, and you went home and you told your wife at the end of the week, and, oh, my new career is in boxing. Okay, great. And on Friday, where's the check?
100%.
We're a little light this week. Where's the check?
I tell them all the time, when I open my mouth, when I see bad things happen, I tell the people, look, I don't need boxing. And obviously, I mean, from a monetary aspect, I'd say I'd save money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would save so much money. I don't need boxing, but then in my heart, I need boxing,
Yeah, and I'm with you. Some people do certain things. Like I had this conversation. Somebody said to me, well, you're here. I said, listen, some people play golf. Some people hang out. Some people go on vacation. They have hobbies. They garden. It's not that this is a hobby. This is what I do. This is what I like doing. And yeah, we've probably lost more money than we made in boxing. And people say, how could you do that? Well, you don't understand.
No, it's once it's in you.
You don't understand it being in the gym, the camaraderie, the people, being around, watching a young fighter progress.
I'll tell you, I was lucky enough after I had left Gleason's gym to go to befriend Ryan O'Leary. Just a great guy, great gym. Champs in New Rochelle, New York, 7th South Division. I tell you, Ryan is a great guy, and the fighters there are great. And we hooked up and we partnered up to manage certain guys together. And it's been a great ride. And
yeah, and you talk about that, right? The relationships you have. And Ryan, I did not know Ryan O'Leary. I mean, back in the day, had fighters always, I got sparring, come here, come there. Always his door has been open. We've become friends. Great coach, great person, great gym, first of all, Champs in New Rochelle on Division Street. One of the good guys in boxing, and you can see what he does and the product he puts out. But that's the camaraderie of the people you want to be around. And like you said, unsung heroes of like yourself, like him. And he's trained and worked with some big people.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, I was so lucky to be able to travel through boxing and go to fights with these fighters. And that's part of the draw, too, is to take a guy somewhere and knock off the local guy, or even if he's, have the advantage. I was in, I've been everywhere to fight, and I've been there with fighters. I've been to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which I love. And, Mike McSorley, integrity fighter. Great guy. Great gym. Yes. Oh, my God. They're just Con Greg, fantastic. I mean,
some dogs out there.
These guys that you meet in boxing, you're saying to yourself, these are just such great guys. And the amount of like, quote unquote, bad guys, I could count them on one hand. Yeah. But when they're bad, they're really bad, Yeah,
but we don't gravitate to that. You gravitate to the good in the sport.
Usually the good guys just hang out with each other.
You know what? And we're all there to help each other. And like you said, I've been blessed. I've had great mentors in this sport. I've been blessed to be in camp with some big fighters and big coaches where it's like, that's my on-the-job training. Yeah. That's an internship right there, and, you learn. We learn from everybody. I think that's the whole thing for me is, I want to keep elevating my game as a coach and being around people that are going to elevate me. And Ryan, I got to work with Amon Lee this year, his team. I mean, just being challenged. Ryan gave me the opportunity to help with TCL and the New York Attitude, a blessed opportunity. And knowing Ryan over the years, I never worked a fight with Ryan.
Right. Okay.
Like we knew each other from the gym,
Sure.
but never, working fights are a little different. You know that you work,
Sure.
But it was great to watch his style and be part of him and with Coach Benny. Big opportunity. But if you had to go back and give advice to someone, Bryant, in this sport, what would that advice be?
I would. If you have to really sit down and figure out what you want from boxing, you have to have a goal. And the goal has to be it has to be measurable, and it has to be realistic. Like any 18-year-old or 17, I want to be world champion.
Yeah,
and then you have to work. You have to work backwards.
How do you want to get there?
Yeah. Well, how could you become a world champion? What are some criteria a world champion would have? Well, he'd win the nationals. Well, how do you win the nationals? Well, you win your local Golden Gloves. Then you go to the nationals. Well, how do I win the local Golden Gloves? Well, then I do this. Well, what do I have to? You have to live for a boxer. You have to live as a boxer 24/7. You're not a boxer Monday through Friday for the 2 or 3 hours you're working out and running. If you want to be a boxer, you have to live as a boxer 7 days a week, every second of the day. You running, you're going to be in the gym, especially as a professional. You're going to run probably as much time as you're in the gym. So if I'm in the gym for an hour and a half or an hour a day in the boxing gym, not strength and conditioning, that's totally different. You're going to have to run for an hour a day or an hour every other day or whatever it turns out to be. And the rule of thumb I use for myself, it worked out, is as many rounds as I'm scheduled. That's as many miles as I'm running that day. So if I'm scheduled for a 4-rounder, I better be able to run a fast 4 miles. If I'm doing 10 rounds, I want to be able to run 10 rounds, at a good pace. That's just me. It could be different for different guys. But you have to be a fighter 24/7. And if you want to get involved in the business aspect, be involved, ask questions, read your contracts. There are so many boxing promoters out there that could use a hand, that if a young man or a woman were to call me and say, look, I'm interested in what you do. Can I ask you some questions? Or I'm interested in what you do. Do you need an intern? Do you need somebody to figure out, this guy's in a contract? Okay. Oh, it's a +1 for the weight, or how do I get this guy here? Well, we got to get a ticket for this guy he has to get his blood work, but we have to do request a test, and you can't use them in New York. You have to send them to Connecticut. These are the little things no one tells you. We have to look, the guy needs per diem. What's per diem? Okay. The guy needs this. He needs hotel and airfare covered. He needs medicals. No, he doesn't need a CT scan or an MRI because he's not fighting in this state. He's fighting in another state where you don't need that at that age. This is all the stuff that it's not written down anywhere, and you just learn through experience. But if someone was to call myself, or I'm sure you or Ryan or anyone, and wanted to be a trainer, a promoter, a matchmaker, the door would definitely be open. the door would definitely be open.
There's
to
a ton of guys out there looking for help, like you said, at every aspect, whether, it's promoters, trainers, interns, coaches. Look, to bring the next level of people to this sport, we don't have enough coaches. We have a lot of people who think they're coaches, and
that's a shame.
And I throw coaches and mentors in the same thing, because as a coach, you should be a mentor to your fighters, to the people in your gym and to the people in this sport, because without mentors, I would not be sitting here. And, I'm sure you had your people that you worked with that, exposed you to this sport. And, we're losing that aspect in. But what's next for Valid Promotion and is it Valid Promotion or Valid Management?
Just Valid Boxing.
Valid Boxing.
Just Valid. I started it.
What's next for it?
I started as a shoe company to make shoes, to make boxing shoes. And then I said, well, I have an LLC I set up. I might as well use it for management. And then I said, well, I guess I can use it for promotions too. So it'd be like an all-in-one deal. I usually was doing one show a year in the fall. I didn't do it this year. I want to do it again in the spring. I want to have at least 2 shows. As far as finances and stuff like that go, we're looking to buy our own rings so we don't have to rent rings, because it's costly. I could rent a ring 4 times, and then with that money, I could have bought a ring. And I could have rented it to other people and made my money. But yeah, we're looking to do another show. I have a lot of fighters that I advise and manage, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm just trying to get those guys the right fights, winnable fights that they're going to win. Hey, if the guys can sell tickets, it puts them in the driver's seat. If they can't, they're behind. They're behind a little bit, but training changes everything, right? One good right hand could change the whole fight. And if the guy's in shape and he believes in himself, absolutely. But I do want to have more shows. I do want to up the pace of the shows. I'm looking at other states as well. I do really like West Virginia.
We've done a lot there.
It's close to New York, that part of West Virginia, Martinsburg. The mayor there has been awesome, Knowles and Mayor Knowles. And it's really close by. It borders Maryland. It's almost a bedroom community to Maryland and D.C. It's one of the Berkeley County is one of the more upcoming, fastest growing counties in West Virginia. It's not deep into West Virginia. That being said, I did a show in Elkins, West Virginia. I'll tell you, the show didn't do well, but what a beautiful area. If I had money to burn, I would do a show there right now, because I just love that area and the people there are just excellent. But the population doesn't support the show, unfortunately, unless you're getting guys to drive in. And sometimes it works, right? Sometimes, most of the time it doesn't. Guys won't willingly get on a 4-hour bus ride, unless it's something crazy, unless you got a world champion or something. But we're just going to keep doing shows. We have a lot of fighters that need attention, that need fights. I like to put the fair fight guys on a show. I've been talking to another great guy, a guy I really admire and respect, Mike Reyes and Marshall Kaufman and all these good guys. And I want to put guys on their shows as well. And I try to put my guys on Mike Reyes' shows to fight each other. And I think that just keeps them alive. It keeps them in the ecology of boxing. It keeps
you relevant.
It keeps the 0-4 guy who's like the little white mouse that gets fed to the boa constrictor. It gives him an opportunity. And you have 2 0-4s or an 0-2, and they're fighting each other. And it comes down to who wants it, who trained the most, because they're both at equal everything. So you're giving this guy a real opportunity. He doesn't go in going, oh man, this guy's a Russian. He was in the Olympics. He's 1-0. He goes and say, this guy's just like me. And if I could train, I can beat this guy. And that's what we're trying to do. We try to match these guys up as evenly as possible. We keep them alive so they don't have consecutive losses. And one of those guys is going to win. And look, one guy's going to lose unless it's a draw or something happens. And the guy who loses is usually not going to get stopped. That helps him out as well, the confidence and the level. And so we try to give these guys a fair shot. Yeah.
Look, I really appreciate your time. I'd love to have some of your fighters down the line here. I think you have a great passion for the sport, some really good ideas that we can really maybe see where it can be taken. Tell us where we can find you on social media. I see you all over the place here. And,
I'm
you're like me. You're trying to keep it going out there, and
Yeah,
You know?
it's the social media stuff. You look, the website's Valid Boxing, www.validboxing.com. You'll see some of the past events. You'll see the shoes. I really like the shoes. If you want the shoes, let me know. We have a limited stock. We're in process of ordering more. You could find me on Instagram, Valid Boxing as well, and Facebook, Valid Boxing, or you could go under my name, Bryant Pappas, as well. We post a lot of stuff there. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we have a photographer, a professional photographer, my sister-in-law, Kat Kassam. Great photos. If you guys want photos done, reach out to me. We just had a clinic. Actually, it was Sunday, and we didn't have that many people show up. It was lightly attended. I was a little upset about that, but everyone who showed up got evaluated, body fat percentages, height, weight, resting heart rate, blood pressure, stuff you usually don't do. Grip strength, max push-ups, max pull-ups, timed sit-ups. Everybody got evaluated. Everybody got professional photographs done in the ring with their ring trunks. The 529, the 401k was offered. We were going to do a hand wrapping class. We didn't because the trainers didn't show up, but that wanted the class. But all that was free. That was free. That actually cost me, but it was all free. So if you guys want photos done, reach out to me. We could arrange something.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, and look, we'd love to have you back because I know there's more to really that we probably didn't even touch today from your level. Bryant Pappas, check his stuff out. From the aspect of the fight game, one of the good people in the sport, will give you the right information. Reach out to him with questions, talk to him, whether it's just a simple question about, how to take a fight, a contract, whatever. He's here to help you. He's been in the game. And once again, we appreciate everybody that's watching and subscribe and like us. My sponsors, Farmer Strength, Foundation RX in Brookfield, BoxingSupply.com, my guy Dan Gray at Get Elevated Apparel. Appreciate all the support. Ian Bick and Matt Cronin here at Creative Evolution. AJ Galante at Champs Boxing. Wouldn't be here without these guys. So once again, Dave McDonough, Coach's Corner Podcast. Train hard, train smart. We'll see you guys in the next round.